vision that's in our code and collecting parks and transportation SDCs based upon that percentage
Mayor?
that I just described.
If I could, actually, number 5 is above decision options. It's the bullet, the middle bullet.
Staff's practice in the past, that piece?
Yeah,
Yeah. Staff's practice, yeah.
that would be number 5.
Okay.
And to my knowledge, that's what Peter's here to help you with tonight, is explain how we've come to that general agreement. And, you know, I told him that we needed to have your direction on this because it hasn't been what staff's been doing in the past. I think it makes some sense. We will lose some SDC revenue from this, but I don't think it will be significant, and it will be a lot easier to implement that provision that's in our code that we consider exempting all additions, because every developer will challenge us and say, I have no impact. And I just have difficulty on the method that we've adopted when it's based upon square footage, saying that if you're building square footage, there's no impact.
Councilor Parker, did you have a question? Brian, what happens when, I'm sorry to phrase this in a hypothetical, but in order to get the information out, I have to. Let's say we determine that because it's a warehouse on an existing building, and what they're doing is getting away from just-in-time delivery to being able to store equipment, product on site. So let's say there are big trucks coming in and big trucks leaving, but actually there's fewer trips. Let's just say that took place, that we determined that because of that warehouse that was going on, and assessed at whatever rate we decide for an SDC based on that warehouse scenario, and then that use of that building changes. Do we recalibrate the SDC, or are we stuck on the original one?
Well, I've got somewhat of an answer for that. We do, because of our business licensing requirements, we are aware of when buildings change of uses occur. It's at a very late stage, but we can assess new uses that occupy existing buildings if it's deemed to be a significant change of use that is more impactful for SDC calculation purposes than the previous use.
Okay, well, I'm fine with...
However, that's a very difficult thing to do. It's not looked at well by the businesses. It's the same concept as, I'm going to lease this existing building and I think the parking is just fine, but yet if we were to evaluate that new use, it may not have enough parking, but if the site is completely developed, how do we make them add the parking they need?
Yeah.
And so I've been very lax on that aspect of business licensing, because I think there isn't anything that's more business unfriendly than promoting vacant spaces because we think they need one more parking space and there's nowhere to put it.
Well,
And-
it also is something that won't come up in due diligence in a sale or a lease
Right.
transaction. You'll never know that
Right.
until you walk in the door. And then
It's an administrative problem.
it's a nightmare.
It really is. And so we're not, I don't like the idea of trying to keep track of what every business is doing. And in my way of thinking, a 14,400 square foot warehouse, whether it's an addition or not, is a potential for increased business success. It's has the potential for expanding your business, whether you currently think it will or not. I've had this same scenario with churches. They'll go in and build a brand new sanctuary, and they'll say, we're not going to increase any traffic, we're not increasing our membership. And so we don't need any more parking lot. It's kind of that same argument, but then 3 or 5 years down the road, because they have a beautiful new sanctuary, their membership has increased. And so that argument doesn't hold well to me from that standpoint.
Well, I get it, and I appreciate it, and actually, I'm going to defer to the other council members, especially Councilor Ayers, who has some more background in this. I've worked with this a little bit when I was staffing the city of Gresham, and we faced the issue of warehouses, new and adjacent. And I hate warehouses in prime industrial areas. I think it's a waste of space, and you don't gain any jobs, except when it's expanding onto an existing business, and you can make it more efficient, and you can make more profit, and that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I see happening here, and I guess it gets us into a little bit of the business plan or the purpose for the warehouse. But unless we get to the threshold that you just talked about, Brian, which is it doesn't matter what the use is going to be, that we don't look at whether they're bringing in one big van a day instead of 10 little vans to provide them with materials and services that they would normally get now without a warehouse. That if our threshold is to take a look at it just on the square footage, then that's what we have to do. But I'm going to need some more direction on what the criteria for our decision-making is.
Yeah. Basically, using the square footage that's provided and the ITE trip manual, that's a nationwide determination on average that this is what this kind of use generates on trips. So because it's an average, a nationwide average, every use will be different than that. The consultants tell us, don't negotiate, just use the standard for consistency, because that's what they planned on when they adopted the methodology, that we would use that ITE trip average. Some will pay more, some will pay less than probably is, truly realistic for their business, but it's administratively so much easier for staff to just use the standard amount, and that way we get the full amount of revenue that they intended when they adopted the methodology.
I'm done.
Any other questions
Yeah.
for, yes?
I just want to clarify, looking at number 5, it's not really there, but it is up here. Say we were to adopt this incremental idea for expansions. Would this current application then possibly, we'd have to have them reapply because they're going to revamp the size of building? Or I question changing code in the middle of a process. I mean, I'm kind of, this is the code, so.
Okay, so they wouldn't have to necessarily reapply. What we've talked about is we've already approved this 14,400 square foot warehouse administratively. There's a real easy process called a minor modification that I approve for them to shrink it down to something less. It will be less impactful. There'll be fewer parking spaces, fewer square footage of building, potentially less landscaping, and we need to look at those things, but it will be an easy process for them to do that. I'm thinking of this, I really don't know for sure, but right now I'm thinking of this as not a code change, but an interpretation of how we administratively implement the addition provision of our code. And if you think of it that way, there may be an advantage, because if we start changing our code, then there's a good chance we might be forced to change our SDC methodology, which we just adopted, which would mean recalculating the amounts that we collect because we've changed the methodology. And so I was informed of that. I hadn't even had time to tell Greg about that. And so it makes me a little nervous if we call and actually do a code change. When we've been doing this for 15, 20 years, staff has had to sit down and negotiate with almost every commercial or industrial user and interpret when there's no impact or when there is, and who we're going to lessen it for and who we're not. And I'm basically letting you know that I've been doing less of that negotiation than in the past and trying to be more consistent. And, you know, that's just the way that I think it's best to do it.
So to understand this completely, that this types of applications, this is something that you do administratively. This isn't something that is coming before the planning commission to be determined, and then we're looking at changing how we do it. This is
And
an
the
administrative
applicant
thing.
right now is trying to decide what size building does he really need. And I'm sure he wanted his 14,400 square foot because years ago they got a 9,000 square foot warehouse approved. They never did build it, so it expired. So they were back here again. So,
Any other questions for Brian at all?
Give Peter a chance
Yep.
here to, thank you, Brian.
Just like to thank the council for hearing us out tonight. I'm here with Ben and Doug Pollock of SMS Auto Fabrics, and I just want to, hopefully you had a chance to review the letters regarding the proposed addition and the SDC's negotiations surrounding it. I'll just jump into it. I will be brief. SMS began the planning process by submitting a modification application to add an additional 120 by 120 to an existing 120 by 240 building. This additional space was wanted by SMS to accommodate the existing inventory of their mail order business. What they do is they sell auto fabrics, they sell it worldwide. And so they have a lot of domestic fabrics for domestic autos from the 1940s and on, and so a lot of their business is just storing this stuff until somebody in the world wants to buy it. And so you can imagine the amount of storage they need. And so having this additional space would allow SMS to spread out the thousands of auto fabrics in their inventory to more efficiently fulfill orders. This addition was for inventory only, and SMS will not be adding employees or increasing the once-a-day deliveries from UPS and FedEx. Thus, this addition would not increase the vehicle trips, which are the basis of the transportation SDC, nor would it be adding employees, which are the basis for the parks SDC. SMS received an estimate from city staff, which included stormwater, parks, and transportation. SMS is not disputing the stormwater SDC, but it is disputing the transportation and the parks SDCs. The city's municipal code clearly states in Title IV, Chapter 4, under exemptions, that an alteration, addition, replacement, or change of use that does not increase the parcels or structures use of the public improvement facility is exempt from all portions of the system development charge. That's right out of the code. Also note that the latest methodology versions, as adopted in January 2013, of both the parks and transportation recognize in Sections 5 that additions may be exempt from SDCs. Those are the consultants Brian's talking about. The discussions and letters with city staff in reviewing this proposed addition and the application of certain SDCs has brought the situation before the City Council for Council to make an interpretation of the municipal code. SMS is not questioning the methodology, we are questioning the applicability of the code, because we have a section of the code that says we're exempt. With the SDCs as currently calculated and applied to the proposed 120 by 120 foot addition, SMS will not continue with this plan. However, SMS is still considering building options in the city of Canby, but would like the City Council to make an interpretation on the municipal code's exemption clause. One such interpretation given by city staff is that additions with square footage, we kind of explained that already, it's the option 5. SMS is appealing City Council to adopt this interpretation so that if SMS proceeds with any size addition, we can easily and quickly calculate the SDC fees and not be in this negotiation process. That's basically what we're asking you guys to look at and consider and adopt.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. Any questions for Peter or Mr. Hasselhoff? No? Okay. Thank you, sir.
I think that's a great solution. I mean, it is subjective when you start looking at it. Like Brian said, the way they do that is it's a square foot. So we only have the square footage to go on. one of the things that you will get if, with that portion in the ordinance is, you're going to get everybody wanting to negotiate SDCs. And I think we should change the code to take that out, but have a very definitive, subjective way to calculate that SDC. And,
Objective way.
yeah, did I say subjective? Excuse me, I meant objective way, yeah. What's it, how do you explain that again? But, yeah, there should be an objective way to calculate that, and this is, I think, a way to do it. The way Portland does it, that still is very subjective. And what happens is that ITEP thing has thousands of different types of businesses in it, and each one have a different trip generation number. And so if you try to use that, then you've got to come in and say, okay, this is not a warehouse, it's a mini storage. And then therefore, what happens is everybody comes and says, I'm not number 998, I'm number 275 in terms of what my use is going to be. So I think this is really an objective way to make that determination. I think it's good.
So, kind of going along with Brian's recommendation of an option 5.
Yeah, absolutely.
That paragraph there, and then,
Yep.
Well, I'm in favor of anything that's consistent, because of, you know, we were, in a lot of jurisdictions, were in the let's make a deal mode at some point, and then the voters told, I can't remember if it was Measure 5 or one of those, that, you know, development pays for itself, that citizens don't pay for development, the developers do, or the development. So, regardless of how you calculate it, which number you use, or whatever, as long as it's a system is consistently applied across all similar activities, I'm okay with. And I'm okay as long as the city, is protecting itself to make sure that the development, whether it be streets, sewers, parks, is covered, that we are able to build those funds so that the amenities for the public and for the businesses is met. So whichever one you want, as long as it's consistently applied. I don't want, whether it's Brian or Brian's successor, or, you know, a planning department 10 years from now, they should not be in a let's make a deal position, being put in that position. It's not a good thing to do.
so I just want to make sure we need to first address this issue,
That's right.
and then revisit. So let's address the issue, that piece first. Is there a suggested motion if it's option 5?
I have a suggested idea, if I could share it.
Yes, please.
What if, say a business was 10,000 square feet, let's say, and let's say they were going to do a 100% expansion of their building. So that business would pay 100% in SDCs. If, let's say, a building was going to do a 50% increase, they would pay 50% of the SDCs, or 25% increase, 25%. And then you would also measure their impact on the parks and things to see. And then I think, so that would be just a thought that I...
Well, you know, are you talking about, you're talking about a box, okay, a building, and these people are going to use a warehouse that may not have any impact, you know, any additional employees, but someone else building this, adding the same size addition is going to be adding, you know, an assembly line, for example, or something that might have an impact of a lot of employees. So you can't do it just on square footage.
Yeah, and then you'd have to measure employees.
I mean, you have to come up with formulas or some guideline to establish it. So, you know, just a pure square footage thing, I don't know, gets you where you want to be.
I also like consistency. My only heartburn is that they applied under the code that does still have the exemption clause in it, and we're making a change midstream. I don't know. I'm not really sure how I feel about that. It doesn't feel comfortable, but I am in favor of making something consistent that there's less room for interpretation on whether or not it has an impact.
Okay, so do we, again, I think directing staff to address this code issue is a separate issue. And so I think we need to decide on, are we going to follow the exemption that's in there, or the agreed upon negotiation, it sounds like, between the city and SMS Auto. And so decide that, and then direct staff to tighten this up so that we might not be faced with this again down the road, so we, correct, am I?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
And that's, I think, is what Brian's asking. And what he's saying is, we can make this not necessarily part of the code, but a policy. And so it's not changing necessarily midstream, it's reevaluating how we look at SDCs and how we calculate them. So it's not necessarily changing the code, it's kind of changing the policy so that we don't negotiate every time somebody comes in. And so this policy going forward would be consistent. It would be the same.
In reality, we're not changing the adopted methodologies that the council just looked at, and we're changing how we interpret the no impact provision that exempts in the code. And we're saying that here's how we're going to determine whether there's impact or not through this
Okay.
incremental process.
So we're not talking about eliminating the exemption, we're talking about
No,
how we're
we're
going to
not.
interpret. Okay.
Right.
Because there would
Right.
still be instances where they would be totally exempt.
Okay. I
I just don't
apologize for the
think
confusion.
parks and
No.
transportation would ever be totally exempt if they're building square footage.
Well, I must thank Mr. Hostetler, who has an innate ability to bring these to our attention and creates rigorous conversation about that, so. Always looking out for the builder, Peter, I appreciate it. So is there, something that we'd like to throw out?
So we have to decide what to do with the applicant tonight.
That's
That's
my-
one issue. And the
Yes.
second is direction on the policy.
Yeah.
Correct.
That's correct.
And I think we're
Word that
in
in
agreement on
advance,
the
motion.
policy, that we want to have it consistent and tightened and so on. So now, dividing the question is, what do we do with this application in front of us and our interpretation of the existing rule, standard, criteria? Help me out there.
Well, I think Mr. Hostetler said he would like to see this policy implemented so that they could apply under this policy.
Yeah, we just want to
That's what
interpret,
he's
this is
saying.
going to be the interpretation that it's a graduated fee, and that's what we want to be able to rely on that, so that if we do a redesign, we're able to easily calculate that fee.
So basically, that's the option 5 that
Option
we've been
5, if
talking
you guys
about.
approve that, then we would proceed with our redesign.
They would make a decision on what to come back with.
Okay.
Basically.
I'm sorry, so you're asking, okay. You're asking to change a policy.
The interpretation, we just
Okay.
want, if this is the interpretation, then let's use this interpretation.
All right, thank you. I think you've gotten there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I ask, Brian, what's your opinion of this? Does this make your life easier, better, worse, no change?
Actually, with Peter's help, in the easy way to calculate as percent goes up, it'll make it easier.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
it'll eliminate
A win-win.
Yeah.
how we deal with additions. Because we've always felt there should be some give when someone's doing that, but is it no impact? So they're totally exempt? I think this is a much better way to deal with it.
Okay. So, Kim, Brian, or if somebody is a linguistics master up here, want to craft a motion for us to use?
I already.
Oh.
To start with would.
I would say something to the effect that I move to accept staff's incremental interpretation of the no impact provision for additions to the collection of parks and transportation SDCs.
I move what he just said.
And I
Is that
said-
legal?
Well, Kim, do you?
Kim, did you
We'll make sure
capture all
Kim
that?
Move
gets-
to accept staff's interpretation.
Yes.
Thank you. I second that.
So, moved by Counselor Ayers, seconded by Counselor Parker to accept staff's recommendation
before we take the vote, Kim, can you make a note for history that we're referring to what we called tonight option number 5?
Yeah, that'll be in the minutes.
Okay.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, that passes 5-0. Great. Thank you,
Thank you,
gentlemen.
Peter.
Thank you.
Go out and sell a bunch of
Thank you, guys.
fabric.
Thank you, Brian.
Mayor Hassan, I didn't get a second on that motion.
I'm sorry, it was Counselor
It was-
Parker.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so there is no need to direct staff to revisit this to clean it up. We have just cleaned it up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, perfect. All right, next piece of business is the recommended direction to address the LUBA remand of TA 12-01 and ZC 12-01.
Okay, I'm back again. The LUBA remand is Save Downtown Canby versus the City of Canby. Save Downtown Canby has been reported to be backed by some existing fuel facilities in town, and they've appealed the council's decision on the Fred Meyer fuel facility proposal at Locust and Highway 99E when you reviewed the rezoning and the text amendment. And if you recall, those changed the sub-area boundary of the downtown Canby overlay from the core commercial, which is similar to what we have in the downtown area, to the outer highway commercial sub-area. That was appealed to LUBA. LUBA finally rendered their decision, and it involved 4 major points. I don't remember them all now because I'm only concentrating on the 2 that matter. We basically prevailed on 2 of the items, but 2 of the items, LUBA felt like there was not enough evidence in the record or the findings to support the council's decision, basically. And those had to do with the transportation planning rule, and there was a dearth of discussion about the transportation plan's adoption, and mentioned that there would be a crosswalk somewhere in this block that this filling station's across 99E, and what impact, if any, that would have on changing the sub-area boundary. And so we needed some discussion to deal with that, whether it has impact or doesn't. But there just wasn't anything in there, the record, and they thought that it was important enough because it was part of an adopted plan. It didn't say exactly where it was going. So partly because the transportation planning rule is a land use topic, it's a complicated issue but it's one that the Planning Commission deals with more often than the council. And because of the fact that the council already on the Fred Meyer remanded back the site and design review that was appealed to you because there was a minor change in the design that the Planning Commission hadn't looked at, so you said, hey, let's send it back to them. Staff kind of anticipated maybe you would want the Planning Commission to be involved in looking at this LUBA remand, and we had placed it on the agenda to do such, and the Save Downtown Canby challenged the fact that we placed it on the Planning Commission agenda without the council's direction, because the LUBA case is from your decision, and so we need your direction to involve the Planning Commission, which staff thinks would be best. You do not have to do that if you don't want to, but the Planning Commission's already reviewing the Fred Meyer revised site plan, and there is a desire on the applicant's part to basically reconsolidate all of the applications because they got split apart. And you may or may not remember, the reason they got split apart is because when they were all together to begin with, the Planning Commission recommended denial and of the text amendment and the rezone. And when they did that, they said, there's no reason to review the development plan because we don't know what the council's going to do with the text amendment and rezone. And so they got split apart. The applicant would like to see them brought back together, and staff actually would too, because it saves us administrative headache in our advertisements and et cetera, and we're able to bring everything back together, and it will all come back to you again, but with a recommendation from the Planning Commission on both the LUBA matters and the revised site and design review. We have already advertised this on and continued it to July 22nd at the Planning Commission. We've already got a packet on our website right now anticipating this. If you don't send it back for a recommendation from the Planning Commission, they just won't review that part. They still have a meeting to review the site design.
All right.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I think it's reasonable to send it back to the Planning Commission, have them continue to meet their agenda. Now, just a pickiness on the terminology there. You call this the Fred Meyer application. This is actually the Oliver application. Fred Meyer isn't asking for a planning decision because they don't own the
I
property.
guess I'd almost have to look at the application form again to even remember
Because we
now at
went through this
stage.
with the library, that you have to own the property before you can.
We needed the signatures of all of the property owners. That was actually an issue on this
Okay.
particular application because not all of the owner is not one individual, it's several, and not all three of those individuals had actually signed the application form.
All right.
We've got them to sign it now. But I guess staff always thinks of it as the development that's proposing to build the building.
Sure. And I know that we've called it that in the past, but I didn't know that the property itself had actually gone into an ownership transfer. But in any case, do you need a motion or just a will of the council? What do you need, Brian?
I think a motion is
A
in
motion
order
would be-
to
Well,
direct
then
the planning commission.
Mr. Mayor, I would move that staff and Planning Commission proceed with its scheduled review of this matter.
I'll second that.
It has been, motion's been made by Counselor Parker and seconded by Counselor Coleman to remand or direct planning and put the LUBA into the hands of the Planning Commission. So remand of TA 12-01 and ZC 12-01 of the Save Downtown Canby versus City of Canby LUBA number 2012-097. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. So directed,
Thank you.
sir. Thank you.
Good seeing you again, Brian.
All right, Sid, yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I've got something I would like to enter into the record, and it's more new business than anything else, so I was wondering if I might have the opportunity to do it at this point.
Sure.
Right, I would like to read into the record a letter that I submitted to City Recorder and the City Administrator about an hour and a half ago. This is a letter to Mayor Hodson, fellow city councilors, and city staff. For the past 4 years, I have postponed full retirement and curtailed our travel plans to commit myself to working to improve our community for all the people of Canby. I have spent virtually every Wednesday evening and countless others with the ideal of serving the people, not a slave to some ideology or with an eye toward my electability to some future political office. As a senior member of this council, during my tenure, I've had approximately 160 meetings just on Wednesday evenings. The midstream decision to kill the library project by this council and hearing the mayor's vision for downtown made me realize I don't have the energy nor patience to continue, especially since this council, like our Congress, has adopted the philosophy that the word no is a strategy to improve our community. From my 43 years of community involvement experience on school boards, commissions, and councils, let me assure you, no is not a strategy. It is simply an excuse to avoid making tough decisions that benefit and improve the community as a whole for all citizens, not just special interest or select property owners. About a dozen years ago, Canby had come to a standstill because of a similar agenda of no. The community came together and voted in new leadership in the form of a forward-thinking mayor and council. The community started to thrive again, and progress resulted in the improvements we now see in the industrial park, downtown, and annual maintenance of our streets all over town. No is not a strategy. After selling $10 million of bonds to build a library and consolidate city offices, this council killed the well-planned and badly needed project. Over $600,000 has been spent on planning and implementing the project. More than $600,000 of private donations had been committed, and the city will have to refund $1 million to the county. The whole community will suffer the loss of about $2.2 million because of no strategy. This council will now have to figure out how to develop a library at another location, or spend the $10 million on other projects, or give the money back to the bondholders at a penalty of another $2 million in interest and penalties. Since the library project has been killed, and while the council dithers about on a strategy to spend or refund the bond money, the city is paying 2.9% interest rate, while the cash sits in the bank making 0.5%. No is not a fiscally responsible strategy. For the remaining 1.5 years of my term on this council, this council will talk but make no concrete decisions on these questions, showing up every Wednesday evening simply to have circular discussions that are not based on reality, where decisions will be put off or decisions made that are later reversed, is not something I have the energy to continue. I have no interest in helping repair the self-inflicted wound this council caused, nor do I have the energy to help you figure out how to unwind the tangle of details to deal with the $10 million bond proceeds. Furthermore, I wish the mayor luck on explaining at election time to the voters that suffering the loss of over $4 million is fiscally responsible for the city. Based on my personal opinion and feelings, it is best I not stay and be a hindrance to the things you need to do. No is not a strategy. The mayor and council president have some ideas about developing another plan for the library and city offices on a different plot of land or a different part of town. This idea is doomed to failure unless you drastically scale back the library to a substandard design. During our preliminary planning for the library, we explored the idea to place the joint facilities on 3rd Avenue. The cost estimate by the experts we retained and paid to advise us, and which was confirmed to us a week ago, was an additional $3 to $4 million plus the cost of land acquisition. If the $10 million project was too expensive for some councilors, then an additional $4 to $6 million is, in the words of the council president, a non-starter. No is not a strategy. Except for the no strategy, there are no goals adopted by this council to guide your path to the future with or without a new library. We are 1/4 of the way through the mayor's term in office, and we have met just twice since January to work on establishing goals based on values to set our direction. Nowhere in the draft goals is the library mentioned, nor is it included on the mayor's blog as a link to other city services. It's like the library doesn't exist. If this council is serious about finding a solution to our antiquated substandard city library, I assume you'll add language to the library, regarding the library, to the goals before they are adopted. Without having established realistic and achievable goals, how is this council going to determine how to spend the $10 million and benefit the community? There seems to be some sort of unwritten agenda the majority of this council has, but what it is a mystery to me. Perhaps that will be clarified when the goals are completed. No is not a strategy nor a goal. When the gavel falls tonight to adjourn this meeting, my resignation from the Canby City Council and Urban Renewal Agency becomes effective. The city has assembled a great staff of professionals, and I'm going to miss working with them. Some have been hired specifically to do a certain job, like build a library, and then due to no strategy, we have tied their hands. I'm especially going to miss those professionals I've worked most closely with: Greg Ellis, Amanda Siebert, Kim Schaefer, Renata Mengelberg, Lieutenant George Troe, Matilda Dees, Jeff Snyder, and Penny Hummel, to name just a few. Canby deserves something better than a no strategy. Thank you.
I'm sorry to hear this, Rich. I- I'm honestly surprised by this, Rich. And I understand it is what you have to do.
I have to do it.
I am sorry that that is the decision you've come to, and you will be missed.
Thank you.
We will move into city administrator's business and staff reports.
I have nothing, Mayor. Thank you.
Another opportunity for citizen input at this point. Okay, not seeing any. Action review.
You've adopted Resolution 1170. You've approved Ordinance 1383 and 1384 to come up for second reading on August 7th. You've accepted option 5 for staff's interpretation on how to handle the no impact provision, and you've directed review of the LUBA remand issues back to the Planning Commission as part of the site and design review on remand.
Okay. Thank you, Kim. Well, we do have an exec session this evening.
Mr. Mayor, I move we go into exec section pursuant to ORES 192.660, parent 2, parent H, pending litigation.
Second.
A motion made by Counselor Dale, seconded by Counselor Hensley to move into executive session under ORS 192.660, parenthesis 2, parenthesis H, pending litigation. We will adjourn to the City Hall conference room and have that there. Consider at 9:15. Thank you, Canby. Good evening.